Welcome. You are tuned into another episode of Municipal Focus. My name is Kevin Tocci. And as we attempt to do on this particular program is to speak about what's going on in the two communities that we proudly serve, Whitman and Hanson, and talk about what it's like to be a part of town government and things that are happening in real time. Joining us today, we're happy to have Laura FitzGerald-Kemmett. She is the chairperson for the Hanson Board of Selectmen. Selectwoman, welcome back to Municipal Focus.
Thank you for having me. It's been a while.
Yeah, so what is, last time I had a conversation with you, it was prior to COVID. How has COVID treated yourself, and how do you feel the community has made it through this pandemic?
I personally have no complaints. I've been fortunate. I was able to work from home. And so I was fortunate in that way. But, I've had family members who were impacted, and certainly we're seeing huge mental health impact in the community, not just our community, really, nationwide, and I dare say even worldwide, with the fallout from COVID. So I think it will be years to come before we really know the full impact.
And then we're dealing with monkeypox. Hopefully this isn't something that is going to be on such a global level. I know the World Health Organization has cited it as something to keep an eye on, and that this is something that could spread. But just imagine.
It's like Armageddon. Honestly, it's too much to even think about. Honestly.
So, during this time, you've been able to, meet, whether it was through hybrid meetings or through platforms like Zoom, like we are doing right now. We're having a conversation on Zoom. Talk to me about doing business virtually as a governing board of selectmen.
It's interesting because I think COVID pushed the envelope on both businesses and government. And of course, government is always very slow to adopt and adapt. But I think that COVID really pushed the envelope, and the Governor Baker in Massachusetts allowing us to meet virtually was, of course, helpful in the middle of the pandemic. And I'm grateful that we had that option. But, something really gets lost when you're not sitting next to people and you're not able to read body language and, just have that feeling of camaraderie. So, did we get business done? Absolutely. Was it the preferable way of doing it? Not for my money. But again, I'm grateful that it's an option. And if we ever need to do it again, then, now we've got that infrastructure and all the protocols and procedures in place that we didn't have before.
It's also worth noting that I feel that the federal government, regardless of the administration you had, the CARES Act under the Trump administration, following behind Biden, had the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA money, which a lot of not only the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but a lot of communities like Hanson are able to utilize in order to build back up infrastructure.
Yeah, and for us, we're still being very cautious about how we're going to spend that money. We've got a lot of big ideas, but not a lot of money. It's money we wouldn't have otherwise had. But, we're really thinking through what are the infrastructure things that are the biggest need right now to move us in the direction that we want to move in. And, we've done some small things like, we've where we want to purchase a generator for the senior center and the library. That doesn't really seem like it's a big or super important thing, but it's one of those things that as we continue to see the impact of climate change, and we're living it right now with the record temperatures, heat temperatures, and over the winter we saw quite a few cold weather warnings. We want to be able to have a place that is bulletproof, that we can have our citizens, particularly our vulnerable folks, come and hang out. And in order to do that, we've got to make sure that we've got electricity and heat for them. And so we need a generator. So that's one of the ways that we're planning on spending ARPA money. And we're looking at other infrastructure things that are a bit too premature to really talk about. But it's honestly kind of nice to have even an opportunity to think about some of those infrastructure things, which typically get pushed to the bottom of the list. Because they're not particularly, they're not really items that people are going to say, wow, I really want new curbing along, whatever the road is, or wow, I really want a new water system. Those aren't typically the things that garner a lot of passion, but they're important. And so for the first time in quite a while, we find ourselves having some money, a moderate amount, that could be spent on those things. So more to come on that.
I was going to ask you, you talked about how the heat is having an effect, and knowing that we are in drought conditions. When you look at other communities who are pleading with folks to conserve water, like a neighboring community such as Pembroke, who is they're fearful of a brush fire for not having enough water to fight the fire. What goes through your mind as a neighboring community who, a fire could be deadly?
Yeah, I mean, I worry about all of the same things that Pembroke is, even though our situation at present isn't as dire. And then of course it raises the issue that's very contentious, that's been going on for years and years and years, about Brockton drawing water from some of these towns, and are they imposing the same water restrictions that we're imposing? I mean, of course, I'm not on the Water Commission, so that's not within my purview to oversee, but I think for the most part, this year, I have definitely noticed more compliance with folks really appreciating that we are in drought conditions. And I have not driven by a ton of people, watering their lawns willy-nilly or any of that. And I've even seen, discussions online about, taking water from your dehumidifier and from your air conditioner and those types of things, like some, really austerity measures that people can take and still water their plants. And at some level, I think you just have to say, my lawn's just never going to be the same again. And it's not really, in the grand scheme of things, the most important, item. So, it's something that I think is going to become more and more front of mind as these types of conditions continue and as they become more habitual. I think we're going to have to collectively, as a state, really get together and figure out what we're going to do about it.
Well, let's talk finances and talk about the town meeting, which is, just a few months behind us. And that is what it was like working up to the 11th hour to be able to draw down any deficit and have a balanced budget by the end of town meeting. What was this year's fiscal budget like?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, it's a bit like Groundhog Day. Every year, it's fire and brimstone. How are we going to make the budget? And of course, we did have to have an override, in the past, but we've had very few. We're really lucky. We've got an excellent financial team. We have in general, great employees up at Town Hall. They're willing to pull together and kind of negotiate and say, well, if you need that, then I'll forego this year, and really try to, work with the selectmen and the rest of the, and the town administrator, the rest of the financial team to try to balance things out. I think because we were just coming out of COVID, and the school budget was really ratcheting up. That was very anxiety provoking, but the school found themselves in a place that they haven't been, where they're finding they need to get more emotional support systems in place, and some of that fallout from COVID, which we know is needed. So it was a bit of a fire drill, but we're lucky in Hanson, Kevin, because we don't just have a May town meeting. We also have our special town meeting in October. And so although we're only a couple of months past getting over the May town meeting, we're we're currently preparing for our October town meeting with that warrant closing on August 23rd. So we're already talking about what we're going to be doing at the October town meeting. So, again, I'm grateful for all of the support, for the town people coming out. I will say one thing that we really learned a lot about at that last town meeting was we had 4 or 5 different marijuana related articles, and it was just too much. People kind of imploded trying to understand what we were trying to do, and trying to feel confident that somebody wasn't trying to pull something over on them. And it was just an abysmal failure. So we've learned, don't try to do too much, and particularly around issues that might be contentious or a little bit sensitive for people.
And it's the idea to possibly tackle more marijuana related issues in the fall town meeting. Usually a fall town meeting is usually geared towards cleaning up financials from the previous fiscal year, unless there's some big project that's on the horizon. Maybe you might need money for feasibility studies. What is this annual, the fall special going to be for this year?
Yeah, so it's a bit early because we haven't actually gotten all the articles in, but I think some of the, yes, financial cleanup, cleaning up accounts, things that maybe weren't particularly urgent for the annual town meeting, but nevertheless need to be addressed. Probably some looking at some community preservation projects. I don't know what they'll bring to us, but I'm hearing rumors and people are buzzing. Perhaps some bylaws, certainly some department heads putting in articles. We've got the Board of Health, who we asked as a select board to come up with a budget, and they were not able to do that before the annual town meeting. My understanding is they're working on that for the October town meeting so that their budget can be restored and nobody needs to lose sleep over whether the transfer station will continue to remain open.
We were touching upon marijuana, and I believe that there's a discussion in regards to marijuana delivery. Where is that at? And is this something that's kind of new and exciting when we're talking about generating revenue? Because that's kind of key.
Yeah, so we had an interesting, I'm not sure if it was the last meeting or the meeting just prior to that. We had the folks from Impressed LLC come in, along with their attorney, who honestly, in all of the years that we've been dealing with Impressed LLC and just marijuana in general, their attorney did a really great job of explaining, what delivery looked like, what the regulations were around that. And we know those are things that people are concerned about. We've heard pretty strongly from, I wouldn't say a majority, but maybe a majority of people that have shown up at town meeting, that they don't feel comfortable with retail marijuana in Hanson. So, and when I say retail, a brick and mortar, store with a storefront that people would walk in. So the interesting part with this is we've already approved a grow facility, and according to the Greenbergs, who are with Impressed LLC, they think they'll be in a place in September to be producing product and selling it, and hence we'll be getting revenue. And at this point in time, because they don't have a license to do delivery, they would literally be turning their product over to somebody else to mark it up and tax it, and whatever town that entity ends up being in will derive benefit from the product. What Impressed LLC would like to do is take that model of the growing and deliver their own product. And their attorney really went through a pretty interesting discussion of just how restricted in the compliance requirements around delivery, and that there's no chance that this would be delivered to a child. It's a person to person, using identification, using online verification, all kinds of body cameras. I mean, it's a fairly intense process, rigorous. So that's something that we hopefully will be bringing to the town meeting. I don't know if it will be the October town meeting or the May town meeting. That's still up in the air right now, but That's definitely something that the select board was interested in trying to pursue. It definitely will really increase the revenue that we would get from a business we've already approved and the voters have already approved to be in Hanson.
As you mentioned Groundhog Day, prior to talking about town meeting and trying to make sure you have the finances. And it seems like it's a repeated exercise. Recently, the town took a look at the properties that it owned. What is this exercise for? Is there a thought to maybe sell some of the land or develop any of the land? Is this in a move to try to create additional revenue?
Yes, it is definitely. This was really a byproduct of the Economic Development Committee, which I chair. And one of the things we were thinking is, well, we have to attract businesses to Hanson, and we hear this all the time, and that's wonderful. And of course, I agree with that, and I don't think there's many people that would disagree with the fact that we need to increase that non-residential revenue, right? So, because right now, the majority of the tax burden is on homeowners. We have so few businesses. We're grateful for the businesses we have, and we're trying to create a more welcoming environment for them. But at the same time, we need to take a look at where could a new business locate in Hanson. And of course, we cannot control private property, right? That's not, we can be supportive, we can, be encouraging, we can try to work with folks on what the regulations are and make that a little bit more comfortable for people to locate here. But one thing that we do have control over is we actually have some properties that either we can sell to get the much needed revenue, but that's a bit short-sighted, right? Because once we sell it, okay, well, that's great. We got money for that one piece of property. But what about encouraging folks to locate and perhaps build on a piece of our property and enter into a long-term lease? So we want to look at all of those possibilities. And see, what's best for the town in terms of long-term revenue that we can count on. And the idea is the Economic Development Committee really wants to take the study that was done in 2018, 2019. The town paid to have a study done that talked about demographics of the ideal customers, what type of businesses would thrive in Hanson, and that type of thing. We want to take that, and then we want to work with the South Shore Chamber of Commerce, Metro Chamber of Commerce, and other similar organizations, and try to woo businesses to locate in Hanson. So that's the next phase. We haven't identified which businesses those are yet, but the first step was to identify properties that we thought people might be able to locate on.
Will this entail further zoning or village zoning, different types of zoning?
It may.
Depending on businesses?
Yeah, it may, depending upon what the business is and which property we're talking about, it may. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it sounds like a great idea. And if it's a way to generate revenue and still keep a piece of property on the tax rolls, I think that's a great idea.
Yep. That's what we're hoping, Kevin.
So moving forward, we haven't talked education yet. I think you had mentioned about schools needing funding for certain areas, especially when it comes to emotional support. Let's talk about the regional school agreement. Where are things at this particular time?
So yeah, back in 2018, we had come to an agreement on what the regional agreement would look like, and the Board of Selectmen had voted to execute that agreement, and we executed it and then figured out, whoops, there were pitfalls for the unwary in that document, and we then backed out of that and ended up, at the end of the day, we now don't have a valid, we don't have a recently updated valid regional agreement. So we're still looking at, I believe, the 1991 version is what is governing right now, which is absurd because a lot has changed. I mean, I think it still had Park Avenue School in Mequon, so a lot has changed. And so Superintendent Simonek and Chris Howard, who's the chair of the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District, came to our last meeting and talked to us about, what was our appetite as a select board for opening up those conversations again and getting something current and valid in place. And we definitely want to work on that and open up that dialogue. I think we have 2 new select board members who were not part of how we got to where we are with the statutory method. And I think, Superintendent Simonek made an offer to sit down with them and talk to them about how we got to where we are. Similarly, I think it will be beneficial if they meet with our attorney who was part of that conversation to understand that truly, and I mean this in the most sincere way possible, we left no stone unturned when Whitman signaled that they wanted to move in this direction. Hanson looked at litigation. We talked to our legislators. We talked to every governing body that had anything to do with this. We talked to other towns. And at the end of the day, to the person, everybody said, you could litigate, but you're not going to win. You're going to lose a lot of money. And so we ended up where we are. But I say all of that, and I say it in 2 minutes or less. And it was a year of those types of conversations. And so I truly want our 2 new members of the select board to feel as comfortable that we really did advocate for Hanson in every way conceivable as the rest of us feel. And then we'll move forward, because I think we all need to have that understanding of how we got to where we are so that we can all agree on the path forward and what we want to look for in the new regional agreement. And clearly, overwhelmingly, the thing that I hear over and over again from people is, even from the people that aren't happy, but they're resigned to the fact that the statutory method is in place and likely will be for the foreseeable future, they say, well, shouldn't we get more representation? I mean, it just seems like a ripoff that, we're paying more per student, but our representation is the same. So, we let Superintendent Simonek and Mr. Howard know that at our meeting. I don't think it came as a surprise, because they've been hearing the same thing. And I think that will be one of the big things that Hanson will be looking for. I'm hopeful that, Whitman as a partner will be open to that, or at least enough people in Whitman will be open to it, that it's something we might be able to achieve.
Do you still feel that the appetite of the majority of the residents in Hanson are still for having a regional school district, or are there other whispers of exploring other avenues?
Well, there's more than whispers. We have Mr. Hickey has been chairing the deregionalization committee. We're actually going to hear on August 9th, so this coming Tuesday, we're going to hear from them what TMS, the consultant that we hired, reached for a conclusion. TMS came before us probably 2 or 3 months ago with an incredibly unsatisfactory end product that didn't tell us the costs for leaving the district. And after all, that was what we were asking for. They were reciting a lot of facts and figures that we could have gotten ourselves off of the DESE website and off of the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District website. And what we really needed to know was, if we want to disengage, how much will that cost? What's the bottom line? So we'll hear about that on Tuesday. And I think then we'll be in a position where we can say, is this financially viable for us to do? My deep-seated suspicion is, just knowing what I know about what we'd have to buy out and the duplicate administration, having to buy them out of the high school, having to create curriculum, all of that, it's going to be quite cost prohibitive. Now, there may still be people, even if we get those bottom line numbers and they seem unwieldy, who say, we don't care, we're sick and tired of being controlled by Whitman and not having the say that we feel like we want to have. and we just want to do it. There may be people that do that. I don't think that that's going to be where the board ends up, but it's too early to predict. And then in parallel to that, Mr. Hickey had reached out to Silver Lake. The board had not discussed this before Mr. Hickey did it, but discussed it after the fact. And he reached out to Silver Lake to say, what would it look like if we wanted to join Silver Lake? And right now, there's been a lot of hubbub about Kingston possibly leaving. I think if Kingston were to stay in the region, and I'm just waving a hypothetical wand here, and if we were to say, you know what, we do in fact want to leave the regional school district, and again, I don't think that that's where we're going to go, but if we did, then if Kingston stays, they would be the wealthiest town. If Kingston leaves, which we've been hearing, then Hanson is yet again the wealthiest town. And I don't think that's really a place we want to be again. It's not going to achieve what we're trying to achieve, which is some equity with votes and representation and what we're paying for students. So again, I don't think that's going to be a path that we pursue, but I'm just 1/5 of a vote, and it really depends on the rest of the board and on the voters. So.
Well, I want to say thank you for doing an exemplary job of explaining such a difficult and complicated matter that still has many more pages, many more chapters still to be written in the history books as to what's going to eventually happen down the road somewhere. Final topic, you've mentioned it a couple of times, so I want to make sure we address it before we go, and that is that you have two new members on the board of selectmen. What is it like to have two new members and to have different points of view to be able to tackle different issues in the community?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed getting to know Mrs. Rain and Mr. Heel. And, Hanson could be a very divided town politically. And, during the race and even after the race, once we knew that they both had won, folks were like, oh, be careful. Oh, this and that. And I really form my own opinions about people. I don't listen to what people tell me their opinion or their experiences. And I'm glad that I do that, because in this case, I have been really pleased with both of them as new members. What I have seen is two people who are very engaged, who are stepping up, signing up to be on committees, signing up to make a difference. And do I think at some point we'll have some type of a disagreement? Absolutely, we're going to disagree, Kevin. At some point, it's going to happen. But you know what? I think it's unhealthy to have a group think on a select board. You need to respectfully and politely, but challenge each other so that you're coming out with the right end result for the town. And so I've been thrilled. They bring a breath of fresh air. A different way of looking at things. And as I said, the willingness to roll up their sleeves is very, very appreciated by me, and I know the rest of the board.
Well, and also you being selected to be the chairperson for a second time. What's that like to be able to lead this group of folks and have the discussions about the important issues in town?
Yeah, it's interesting, Kevin. Every board, it's like a new culture. It's like each board has its own culture. And of course, depending upon who you've got as a town administrator, that changes it too. So this is like a whole new world, because we have a different town administrator than when I first chaired. And we have a completely different board with the exception of Mr. Hickey. So it's, I'm feeling very hopeful about things. I really feel like we're heading in the right direction. People want change, but not just for the sake of change. They want to move things in the right direction. And so far, we haven't had any kind of knockdown, drag out, or disrespectful conversations. And, so I'm feeling pretty good about it.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk about some of the things that are going on with the Board of Selectmen and also the great town of Hanson. It's very much appreciated.
Well, thank you for having me, Kevin, as usual. Have a good one.
You got it. She is Laura FitzGerald-Kemmett, chairperson for the Hanson Board of Selectmen. And we want to thank you for tuning into this episode of Municipal Focus. Until our next episode, have yourself a great day.